when we're in this state of Marianismo, it can limit us also to, be able to say no, right? And just say, no, I can't do that right now. Or no, family, I'm going to go get a massage. Something as simple as that. So we talk about activating the cultural driver and deactivating it, and really understanding, when it is serving us and then when it is not, and what we need to do when it's not serving us, what we need to change around our environment, and sometimes even the people around us as well.
Have you heard the concept of Marianismo? Marianismo explains cultural and societal expectations many Latinas have been raised with. So do you know how it impacts you? Hi, this is Dana Bernal with Corner Office Latinas. I'm a career strategist who guides ambitious Latinas through major career moves. Today, I speak with Dr. Patty Delgado about the concept of Marianismo, what it looks like at home and at work. How can we embrace the best of its traits while being mindful of its limitations? Dr. Delgado is CEO and founder of the Bridgify Group and co-founder of El Puente Institute. Let's jump in. Hi, Dr. Delgado. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here and have this amazing conversation that we're going to have together.
Well, I first heard the term Marianismo at a conference when you and I met last year, actually at the Lean In Latinas conference, which is also coming up on August 9th. I'll put that in the show notes for our friends. But talk to us about Marianismo, because after you spoke about it and people were writing notes and they were on the edge of their seats, I was at this other gathering a couple of weeks ago where a young woman mentioned Marianismo. And I said, okay, this is something that we need to hear about and talk about. So tell us a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, so the concept of Marianismo has been around for some generations, just as machismo is another very familiar word in our culture. And we believe in the Institute at El Puente, where I'm a co-founder of, that the terminology has now evolved into creating an awareness for Latinas to understand how this woman identity shows up for them. And the term is Marianismo. So traditionally, it is a term that's used to describe a Latina, a traditional Latina, the expectations that we have as we show up into places, workplaces, family gatherings, the different attributes that machismo is describing are attributes such as we have to be nurturing, we're the caregiver. There's a purity sense in the word Marianismo. Submissiveness is another terminology that is very much correlated with Marianismo. And so we've seen that this term is definitely one that shows up in our subconscious. We're taught to possibly not say anything. We have dichos like calladita más bonita. My mom used to always tell me, why do you talk so much? ¿Para qué hablas tanto? And so, there's these different expectations that so ironically, we have inputted into our subconscious, and it shows up in who we are. So Marianismo is definitely a traditional term that has been used, but now is being used in a more practical manner and being used for us to understand our identity and then be able to utilize it in the workplace. How can we amplify our Marianismo and being a Marianista? And it's still evolving, and we could definitely talk about the other terms that are now coexisting with the term Marianismo.
So a lot of people are probably nodding their head like I am right now. I'm thinking that you and I have very similar mothers in the way they expected us to show up and behave. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with being maternal or nurturing, but it's about the boundaries or the expectations. So how can women sort of identify those external factors? Like, is it the people, is it the mom or the spouse or the sister that is expecting something from us, but it's too much? Like, is there a boundary that we can find?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think all our own individual lived experiences will have a different story, and the expectations that were placed on us as we were growing up as Latinas in a Latino household. And so I think the only boundary right now that we communicate to Latinas to be very mindful of is this way of behaving or thinking serving you? Is it serving you being a leader in the workforce? Is it serving you being the caregiver in your household? I think that's the boundary right now that we're encouraging Latinas to do, is create more awareness around Marianismo, what it is, and how it looks like for you, because it's completely different. Like you said, your upbringing is different from my upbringing. We can both be Mexicanas, we can both be from Puerto Rico, but it's always very individualized. So we always ask Latinas to start taking time to assess what that looks like for them. And then when the behavior comes up, for example, you're in a meeting and you really want to say something and you're hesitant to speak up for whatever reason. You don't want to seem pushy. You don't want to seem too loud. You don't want to seem overbearing. These are all parts of Marianismo. So you stay quiet. When you see yourself behaving in that manner, the question to ask yourself is this serving me to be like this? Is it serving me to not say anything in this meeting? And so
Right.
as far as, barriers and understanding the concept, that is one of the biggest questions that we're asking Latinas to ask themselves. Is it serving me? And if it is, wonderful. Amplify your Marianista. Being a
Yeah.
Marianista can be amazing for Latina leaders, right? Because we are very nurturing. We can be very caring for our team. We can showcase that we're very genuine, that we care about you and our individual employees and so forth. So you can amplify that superpower of the Marianista, but then also be aware of the shadow sides, like this example that I gave, that it can hold you back. And so is it serving you? And if it isn't, how can you rephase the behavior so that it does serve you?
Yeah. So it sounds like being subordinate, not speaking up. Those are some of the ways that it shows up at work. But then there is the flip side, because over the years recently, with more women in the workplace, more women assuming roles as leaders and managers, corporations have started to realize the great strength that women, all women have, a little bit more empathy. They're understanding, they've got great intuition. So we lean into that. So there has to be also some strengths or some upsides of the Marianismo that people can identify at work. So what might some of those examples be? What could that look like that you can kind of at least take advantage of this innate feeling that we have and use it as a strength?
Yeah, most definitely. There are big, what we call superpowers in the cultural driver of Marianismo. So at the Institute, we have labeled all these cultural values that show up for us as Latinos as cultural drivers, because we have the ability to drive the value of Marianismo, like you said, so that it serves us, so that we show up as empathetic leaders, inclusive leaders. And all of that is a superpower that we specifically as Latinas have, which is amazing. But as a culture driver, we also have the ability to like hone it back or kind of like put the brake, right? To be able to ask ourselves, is it not serving me at this moment? Do I have to behave in another manner? Do I have to tap into another type of value to help me, advance in my career? And so right now what we're seeing, and I know this is a little bit from your question, but I do want to share right now what we're seeing in the concept of Marianismo is that it's evolving because of our generations, right? Our younger generation, our millennials, also the
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z Latinas that are coming in. They're challenging these ways of behaving. They're challenging these expectations, right? They're saying, I'm not going to have kids right away. I want a career and then kids. Or they're saying something like, I'm not going to serve my partner, husband, so forth. They can serve themselves. So they're really challenging these very traditional ways, which is what's creating this amazing evolution of this superpower Marianismo that we have. So now the next step from traditional Marianismo is what we are researching and have uncovered, which is called Nuevo Marianismo. And in Nuevo Marianismo, these are women that acknowledge that they appreciate a traditional role, but they're also ready to take their own strength into their own hands, right? They're resilient. They have self-determination. They're getting educated. They're moving up in the career ladder. They're kind of standing in their power. However, now with the younger generation that's coming in, the next term that is coexisting with Marianismo is now what we call embrismo. And so an hembra is a flame. And when you look up embrismo in Google, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
that it kind of pertains to a very extreme feministic way of being, like extreme, extreme. So we always
Oh,
kind of want to bring it back, right? Because this is all about balance, right? How do you balance these values to help?
yes.
And so embrismo is kind of the state of mind where you're valuing and celebrating your femininity, your identity as a Latina. A lot of younger Latinas, they have like a Latina strong type t-shirt, right? They're really standing in their power. They're counterbalancing historical male-centric narratives, and they elevate the significance of women contribution to the family, to the community, and to the career. And so now you're an hembra, right? And so we always tell Latinas, you have the power to move up and down this continuum. You have the power to be a Marianista. You have a power to be an hembra. You have a power to be in the middle as a Nueva Marianista. So it's such a beautiful concept. And thank you for creating this platform to have these conversations, because I think it's important now today that we as Latinas, sin envidia, without jealousy, come together and discuss how this very important topic shows up for each of us and how we can support each other when it's not serving us.
I'm thinking about family gatherings. My mom, who's of a certain age, and me in the middle, and my two daughters. And we kind of fit into the three different categories. My mom would have been the ultimate at the Marianismo. Even though she ended up working, she would come home and still make dinner for dad. And she still makes the meals for dad, even though he's fully capable. And my husband and I have more of a partnership, and my kids who are in their teens, I suppose. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, but they're definitely much more independent. So let's talk about this family gathering, right? Where we've got all three generations. We're at the bridal shower or we're at someone's birthday party. And you can see the women who are Marianismo kind of looking at the rest of us, and they expect us to bring the food. They expect us to clean. They expect us to show up in a certain way. So how can the women who are starting to identify that, hey, this isn't serving me so much to be the ultimate caregiver 24/7? Because as women went into the workforce, we still are doing a lot of the caregiving, a lot of the child rearing, the groceries, and the food. So how can women then start to push back a little without using that word to mom or grandma, right? So how can they just, start testing the waters on some of these boundaries?
Yeah, that's such a great question also, because I think the biggest thing about this particular concept is that it's founded on empathy, right? If we really look at the traditional definition of Marianismo, it's about giving back. It's about self-sacrificing, caring and nurturing. So it is founded on this amazing concept of being empathetic. So when there are different generations in a room, in a family room, as you just so eloquently described how it shows up, and if you are one that is challenging a traditional Marianista viewpoint, I think the best way to do is to create empathy with our traditional Marianistas to say, this is their lived experience, right? This is what they were taught as they grew up. Maybe at that time, of course, we know they didn't have an internet. They didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
They didn't. So they behaved in a way that was going to keep them safe. They served their husbands every day because that was the way it was back then. So when we can create a level of respect and empathy for their ways of thinking, then we can also transport that so that others can create that same level of respect and empathy for the new ways of thinking. And so a lot of the times, our traditional Marianista tias or mothers, they're going to probably stay like that. And that is okay, right? Again, that's their own lived experience. But we can very empathetically and with a lot of love and nurturing have conversations around why we need to think a different way. Or you have a conversation with your mom about, well, I'm working these long hours because I want a career. Or maybe your daughters might have a conversation with you around, this is the way that it is, mom, and this is the way that we're showing up in our current spaces. So I think if we can all keep in mind the foundational parts of Marianismo that is driven by empathy, respect, and nurturing, I think we can all continue learning from each other and really amplifying each other's strengths, because traditional Marianistas still have amazing strengths that we can continue learning from.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at those traits that you just listed about being empathetic and being a good listener and a good caretaker, those are wonderful things. And that made our parents, our mothers, very proud that they were excellent caregivers. And no one's going to take that away from them. And no one is going to leave my house unless my mother feeds you. And that is her superpower. I know my friends used to joke about this in high school all the time. And if that makes her feel accomplished and successful, successful that she has taken care of her child. But even though I am of whatever certain age, that she
Yeah.
still makes sure that I am fed, my friends are fed. That is a lovely thing. And that brings her joy and satisfaction. So I hadn't thought about this truly that, for her and her generation, I might just have to let that be and see the strengths in it. But that doesn't mean that I have to show up that way at work. But it is helpful to understand just where it comes from because it's so deep and so ingrained.
Yes, yes. I mean, these concepts, they're passed down from generation to generation, right? We can look at the Latina woman back in the 1600s and the role that they played. It was still very much about the family sticking together. And so Latinas, if we think about our history and our past, we've always been very much together with our male counterpart. And so I think Latinas today will fight over a man than, than each other, right? Before they'll put their man before their friends. I've seen that in telenovelas and even in high school or real life high school type situations, because we don't always know also how to collaborate. And so in Marianismo, I think it also allows us to, again, create a level of empathy and respect towards each other as Latinas so that envidia, jealousy, and this type of behavior that does show up as Latina women in our communities can be eliminated, and we can empower each other to be better, empower each other to apply for that position, that bigger position, help each other when there's opportunities, and really be those strong strengths. And Lean in Latinas is an amazing organization that exemplifies exactly that, when we can use our Marianismo in the strength and in the beauty of it to help each other.
Yeah. And I think about these traits of how Marianismo shows up at work. And one of those is that you're a very can-do person. You do everything. So sure, people love having you on the team because you're the first to show up and volunteer to put together the PowerPoint, or you volunteer to put together the travel arrangements, or you do all these things. But you've got to remind yourself and push yourself up. Those tasks will serve you in the beginning of your career, right? That you are helpful, you're a team player, but eventually you've got to promote yourself in your own mind. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if some of us will have that issue that we're so stuck to the tasks that are satisfying, that we know that we can accomplish, and we get rewarded. We get that pat in the back. Hey, thanks for arranging the group lunch. But no one's getting promoted for arranging a group lunch. So at some point, some of the young people need to realize that they need to push themselves up.
Right. Definitely. And there's a concept that we use in El Puente Institute where we talk about activating your cultural driver and deactivating your cultural drivers. So as an asset, Marianismo can empower you to be nurturing, to be an amazing mentor, right? I think Latinas are amazing mentors,
Oh, yeah.
to display empathy, and we're cheerleaders, and we encourage our teams, to have career succession and so forth. And we're leading with a balance of work and family with Marianismo. But when we want to deactivate it, sometimes as a limitation, it can cause us to create this like perfectionism,
Oh, gosh.
and it can cause us to not have boundaries, right? So you're right. You're the one, you're the one organizing the Christmas party,
Oh, yeah.
cleaning the lunchroom, right? So there's no boundaries. So that's how it can be a limitation to us. It can also limit us to doing what is hard for us to do, which is self-advocacy, right? To kind of
Mm-hmm.
toot our own horn when we're doing amazing things. A lot of Latinas will not say how amazing they are
Oh, yeah.
because of, again, Marianismo kind of teaches us not to. However, the hembras will say how amazing they are. They have no problem, saying everything that they've done that's been amazing.
Yeah.
However, when we're in this state of Marianismo, it can limit us also to, be able to say no, right? And just say, no, I can't do that right now. Or no, family, I'm going to go get a massage. Something as simple as that. So we talk about activating the cultural driver and deactivating it, and really understanding, when it is serving us and then when it is not, and what we need to do when it's not serving us, what we need to change around our environment and around, sometimes even the people around us as well.
Well, let's talk then a little more about self-promotion at work, which a lot of women have a tough time with. So if you are a Latina with this Marianismo, that humility, right? That we're not supposed to toot our own horn. But let's face it, in today's business world, if you don't remind people of your, Q3 sales, or if you don't remind your boss of all the great work that you've done, we can't just assume that the boss is going to promote us and give us a pat on the back. We sometimes have to put ourselves out there. So how can someone who is used to that humility, who is not used to bringing attention to themselves, try and do that in the workplace in a way that works for them, but doesn't let them sit back behind the Marianismo?
Right. So from a psychological perspective, the first thing is awareness, right? So being aware that you're not volunteering all your amazingness so generously is the first step, right? If you're doing it, wonderful, right? Continue
Right.
doing it. If you're not, having that awareness that why don't I share with my boss that I got promoted or that I'm serving on a board, right? Or that I completed this certification. So the awareness would be the first thing. The next thing would be is when you're in that situation that you need to do self-advocacy, what does that feel like in your body? Like, do you cringe? Do you kind of think in your head, oh my God, ¿qué va a decir la gente? Like, what are people going to think? Or do you feel like, oh my, I'm not going to put myself out there. So kind of understanding what are the reactions that your body is having and that your mind is having. And then the next step is probably the hardest step, to let that thinking go. It's not serving you, right? So reminding yourself, it's not serving me if I don't speak up and say that I received this LinkedIn certification. So that's the hardest part, is just letting it go and now creating a new narrative, which is I received a LinkedIn certification and it helped me do this, this, and this, and it's going to make me a better leader, right? And so that's the hardest part, is letting it go and not worrying about what people are going to say, because Latinas worry a lot about what people are going to say.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is like a big thing. ¿Qué va a decir la gente? So not worrying what people are going to say, and just, creating how comfortable that feels for you. And so I think those 3 steps are pretty, they're intentional and they can be done very simplistically, but they are going to have to you're going to have to be in an awareness state to be able to see what that sounds like and feels like, and then what the new narrative would be.
It's so interesting that you talk about getting in touch with your body and listening to your body, because I just did an episode a few weeks ago with another terrific coach who that's her work, is using your body and listening to your body's signals. So go back and listen to that and find your signals. But tell us a little bit though, Dr. Delgado, how did you get here? How did this work come to you? And when you were in college, how did your path take you here?
Thank you for allowing me to share my story. I think our stories really exemplify, the journey that we've taken. And so mine began I am originally from El Paso, Texas. It's a predominantly Hispanic community. I had the desire to leave El Paso and study outside, right? I was ready to get out of the community.
Yeah.
And so I did venture into going to school in Minnesota. And so out of all places,
betcha.
Yeah, you betcha. Out of all places, Minnesota. And it was cold. I was maybe one of 3 Latinas in the college. And it was a big culture shock for me. I was not prepared for the labels that were placed on me as I went to a place that I was now a person of color, a minority. I didn't even know. I had to call my mom and say, Mom, they're saying I'm a person of color. Like, what is that?
What?
Don't worry about it. No te apures. You go do your work. Like, go study. Yeah. And so with that particular experience, and then my doctorate really gave me the opportunity to research this topic and research the Hispanic community at a deeper level. And I had the amazing opportunity of meeting 2 amazing women, which are my co-founders at El Puente Institute, that also share the same passion that I do about learning from our community from a deeper level. And so with all 3 of us together, we have been able to amplify the research that we're doing with Latinas, amplify the understanding and the teaching around these very deep concepts like familismo, Marianismo, respeto. There's other drivers that we have in our community that also show up and even intersect at times. And so I've had the privilege of working with these 2 amazing women, Dr. Alejandra and Dr. Patricia. And now with the Institute, we have a platform where we can create awareness and training and impact, right? And give this information to Latinos that are ready, Latinas that are ready to move and learn about their own cultural identity and really use it as that superpower, kind of deflate this deficit thinking that sometimes comes with our community, and really create that amplified thinking that we are amazing. We have so much to give as a community, as individuals, all these drivers, all these values people have to learn how to be inclusive. Like we know what that feels like, and
Oh,
because of
yeah.
Marianismo. So it's just creating that bigger awareness. And so that is my journey has brought me here. I'm very grateful and excited. And 3 Latinas have started this institute, and we're very proud of the work that we're doing and are going to be doing in the future.
So take us back to the office. I used the example earlier of the 3 generations. So you've got like a Gen X or someone older, you've got the millennial, and then you've got the Gen Z. And we talked about them at the bridal shower or at the house party, but let's bring them to the office now, because realizing that you might have a Latina mentor who she has had to, on the Gen X side, she's had to push through, and she might have sucked up a lot more at the office, whereas that Gen Z person has no tolerance for it. And then the millennial in the middle is like, what is happening? So,
That's
so
very
let's talk.
well articulated.
Yeah. Well, especially because one of the gals I was talking to, and she is on the younger side, she said, a lot of Latinas didn't go into, in her case, tech in the early 2000s or in the 90s. So she has no Latina mentors to look up to. And I thought that was so compelling. And so now that we are trying to find that mentorship, that professional development for them, when we do get them together, realizing that they each come at this from a different place. So let's say we are in the coffee room and we've got these 3 generations of amazing Latinas. What should they be looking out for and learning from each other, but also respecting just that background of how that person got to where they are?
That would be an amazing, just like case study, right? An amazing
Yeah.
video to see the interactions between 3 generations of Latinas. Ultimately, I think that the biggest thing to look for would be how the foundational aspect of Marianismo shows up for each of them. And it would probably show up very cordial because we want to be polite, right? That would be like the initial, we call that simpatía. It's the initial introduction when you meet people or you have a relationship with people. We're very polite and very cordial. So you would probably see that first. And then we would talk about a topic, and this is where the intersections of different opinions would show up. And I think the only real advice that I would give Latinas, whether you are a younger Latina leader or, you're a seasoned Latina, is to really show up with curiosity. I'm so very curious with this younger generation. I did my dissertation on Latino millennials back then, but just very
Yeah.
much with curiosity of, why are you thinking like that? Help me understand a little bit more why you see it like that. Being very curious and asking those open-ended questions just to learn from their perspective. And they will, I think the younger generation has I want to say it's a very sweet insight where they do also want to learn from the older generation, except
Mm-hmm.
our culture is not very it's not very inclusive to the younger generation because they don't have money, they're not of a leadership authority, so there's not a lot of respect for our younger generation in our community, unfortunately. And
Mm-hmm.
respeto is a big part of
Mm-hmm.
our community, right? And so
Yeah.
these younger people, again, they're not older, they don't have money, they're not in these high leadership positions. Maybe some of them are, which is wonderful. And so sometimes we just disregard them like, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
I think it's our job as seasoned Latinas to invite them to the table, to ask them their perspective, to really be very curious about how they're thinking. Because I think that's the biggest danger in our community. If we don't give our younger generation a voice or a place at the table, how are they going to learn from us as well? And so I think there's really a big responsibility for us, mentor and seasoned Latinas, to give that place at the table for the younger Latina. And again, approach everything very much with curiosity and open questions like, tell me more, help me understand. Like those are kind of very simple, open-ended questions that you can ask at a table with 3 generations in it.
Yeah. And as you get to know them, get to know their background, how they ended up where they are. And when you start to ask questions, you'll start to realize that their upbringing had some similarities, but maybe some differences. And then you can really understand them better. And I think that is another thing that the Latinas do excel at, is that we are gregarious. We like to go out for coffee and cafecito and little happy hour. So take that. That's another strength that we bring, is that we do like community. No,
Yeah.
seriously. I think that's why the Lean In Latinas networking group has been so successful, because we love community. And especially after COVID, A lot of us were really, searching for that. So building our community with different generations, I think that's going to be what you're talking about is going to be so helpful, because I see a lot of networking groups that just sort of fall into different categories based on generations. And that's okay. If I'm a woman with 20 years of experience, I'm going to want to talk to other managers, other leaders. And if I'm just out of college, I am going to be around other college folks. But if we can try and find ways to mix it up, that way they each have a little bit of experience dealing with the other one. They can learn so much from the other. So
yeah, there's so many benefits in the generations. And we know from generational studies, what impacts generations and the shifting of generations is technology, parenting, and environmental impacts, right? And so this younger generation, their technology skills are out of this roof.
huge.
Right? They had, unfortunately, the impact of COVID in their upbringing, right? Like, I'm a Gen X. I had the impact of 9/11 in our upbringing, right? And so even these external experiences that we've all been through have shaped how we show up. So there's a very unique intersection between culture and generational aspects, which we love, are fascinated with. And it's something that we do need to keep in mind when we're interacting together. There's a lot of assets that the younger generation is bringing to our community. We have to give them an opportunity to share it.
Well, and we're going to be watching your group to research it and report it back to us and synthesize it and make sense of it. Okay. So I will link to all of your information, but tell us real quickly, where can people find you?
We're on LinkedIn more than anything right now. That's our biggest platform. Of course, we're also on Instagram, and just look for El Puente Institute. That is the institute that I co-founded, like I said, with my other two Latina co-founders. And we're an institute that is about helping the Latino community find their strengths, find their superpowers, and also helping our allies understand us at a deeper level, deeper than guacamole, Cinco de Mayo, right? All those things that they're like, oh, yay, which is wonderful. That is part of our culture, but there's more to us. So we do also work with a lot of organizations, ally organizations that want to recruit and retain the Latino community and workforce. We're a large workforce. We're going to be around a long time. We're a very young workforce. So it really is imperative that organizations and leaders are looking at our community to create pipeline opportunities and recruitment and retention opportunities. So we are the experts in that area.
Well, and you are the expert. Dr. Delgado, thank you so much for spending time with us.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do.
You take care. Thank you for listening. For more, visit cornerofficelatinas.com, where we give you the framework, inspiration, and support you need to reach and thrive in the corner office. We have some free downloads on the website, where you can also sign up for our e-news, so we can keep you posted on workshops and events coming up that you will not want to miss. That's cornerofficelatinas.com. See you next week.